So, David, I want to talk about your experience with this because obviously I've known you for a few years here. I've watched some of your hearings online and everything. And I got the impression that there was one particular child custody evaluator in your situation that does not really have a lot of fans in this area. And I think with what you alluded to earlier, that she had a relationship with one of the attorneys that employed her quite a bit, and if I remember correctly, wasn't she one of your judges?
She was Judge
Okay.
Mousy.
Yeah,
Catherine Mousy.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the child custody evaluator was Alissa Sherry. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then the judge is Judge Mousy. There are a lot of people that do not like Alissa Sherry. They've said that she has damaged and destroyed and caused so much upheaval in people's lives. Men and women have both said this. And they do not think that she should be qualified, that she should just be, that nothing that she does has been right for the most part. I just want to hear your thoughts about how the process worked with you, how her process worked with you, and was there any type of bias? I mean, when Catherine Mousy, who used her in the past, there was that relationship developed. Does Catherine Mousy implicitly trust her then? Whatever, quote, the expert says, judge is going to go with. You're free to talk about anything you want to with regard to Alissa Sherry and the child custody evaluation and what you've experienced in the courts.
So I think that early on there was a certain amount of naivety, and I think that certainly was influenced by naivety and the desire to have things function better. Mm-hmm. And as with any non-cohabitation situation or divorce situation, there was issues, and my thinking was, okay, can we get a neutral person to eyeball the situation, to evaluate the situation, so that we can bring some improvements to the situation. And she was recommended to me by the attorney at the time. And so she was installed in our case by an agreed order, which meant that at the time both parents had waived their fundamental rights and agreed to have this agent of the court come in, mm-hmm. invade their privacy to help come to some resolution of the situation. She was installed in our case. And, you know, at the forefront, very pleasant, very charming, very disarming, very smiley, very giggly. And I think as with any case, you know, you provide all the documentation, realizing that you're trying to provide a complete picture, but also realizing that there's a cost factor.
Yeah.
You know, and so the more in depth that you're going to get with this, the more it's going to be costly. So from my perspective, I was providing the documentation that I believe was providing the picture from both sides completely. So that would include things like, you know, our family wizard messages that was complete, or from either side, mm-hmm. other documentation. But also realizing to get to the point, you know, because this is costing me, because I was designated as the one paying for it.
How much do you have to pay an hour for something like that?
Her charge was $350 an hour.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many hours did you spend reading the documentation?
I don't know. I have a question about that.
Yeah. So there could have been a little fudging, perhaps. I don't know. I'm not saying don't go on record here, but mm-hmm. I have to wonder, because I thought that in one of the more recent hearings that you had, that you had to front her like $20,000 for another evaluation or something like that. I don't know what exactly the details of that were, but.
Well, so at some point, I think it was early April, I decided to go pro se. Mm-hmm. So, and right before I went pro se, the previous attorney who was representing me submitted a subpoena for all documents or files. And at first, there was a delay in receiving them. And included in all those files, not only the case file, was all her previous cases. And then I went pro se. Now, keep in mind that when you're receiving those documents, the case file, and you're receiving your previous case list, as with any expert, that's part of disclosure. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's discoverable. Mm-hmm. So part of that discovery is being able to contact the previous cases. I mean, it's part of that, could be part of the witness list, part of the
Gotcha.
background
Yeah, okay.
evidence.
I got you. I got you.
And so when she finally submitted that to all that information to my previous attorney, her email to the attorneys was that she was concerned that either party would attempt to contact that prior list. And in her opinion, that would be poor boundaries. And she thought that that would represent possibly reflecting poor boundaries of the parent to the child, which...
But that kind of like protects her, doesn't it? From
So basically what was interpreted is that she was saying that if we were to do the proper discovery and contact prior cases, as part of that could be that could influence her testimony in court.
Yeah.
Which would influence the impact of the parent-child relationship.
Yes.
So it was a statement violating her fiduciary duty.
Yes.
In order to protect herself.
Yeah.
There was one other statement, which again in my naivety, not knowing better, and also kind of in a state of, at that time, desperation,
Right.
to have somebody try to help get things improved.
Yeah.
In her contract, she prohibited contact with certain, I guess, parent rights groups or father's rights groups or this, that, and the other, and that if there was any contact by either party, that she would drop the case and she would get the court to court order refunding money to the other party for any costs they incurred, which is again another fiduciary violation.
Yeah.
To benefit herself.
Yeah.
Which is an ethical violation.
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem a bit unethical. And by the way, I mean I've looked at Alissa Sherry's website, and I've seen some of the stuff that she's tweeted out. It's my opinion. You don't have to share it, but it's my opinion that she almost has her own inner troubles.
Well, I think that as pro se, self-representation, but even represented, you're allowed to do discovery. I mean, that's part of the process, and part of the process is you get as much background about the expert as you can.
Yeah.
And so obviously she has several tweets in social media in the past about, being a feminist. There's even some really interesting tweets that I don't have in front of us right now about it's okay to have balls as long as you're a feminist, or it's okay to have a cock as long as you're a feminist, something to that effect.
There's been some pretty terrible things that she's tweeted out.
Yeah.
Pretty vulgar.
Yeah. There are a couple of blogs that she's written that I thought were really interesting. She described in one blog about how her advertised aunt, she was later to discover as her father's mistress, when she was a child. Another blog in which she stated that the happy, the pleasant demeanor of her mom was actually, she found out later, was actually due to mom's alcohol problem as she got older. And so not to cross boundaries. It's not my role to be a psychiatrist with this person.
Right.
But just from the layperson's perspective, you can learn a lot about psychological functioning just by watching YouTube.
Right.
You can be in a layperson's social media domain, and there's so much information, technological information, and science information. You don't have to be a professional to understand. Okay, there could be some pre-existing issues going on with this own person that they're not identified, that's invading their professional processes.
And what would concern me is that somebody like that is going to be writing a custody evaluation report that will impact your life with your son.
I think, yes. And I think that, or my son or somebody's daughter or somebody's life, if they're walking around wondering where mom or dad is, why they're not there. And Another interesting blog that she posted was a blog about her ex-husband, where she uses his name as David, ironically, and apparently this was a scenario several years ago. She was married to somebody. In the blog, she used the name David, but based on a story from one of her friends, she writes about the ex-husband sexually assaulting her friend and puts this on public media. And in today's day and age, anybody can look up and easily find out who this ex-husband would be, even if you use an alias or not.
Right.
So based upon hearsay, she writes a blog insinuating a serious criminal offense by one of her exes.
Yeah.
But my question
One
would
of her
be,
exes?
or
her
an
ex.
ex-husband.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So my question would be, why did she feel like she had to write that blog? And it matched a similar scenario. Based on hearsay, she comes to a conclusion and publicizes it.
Yeah.
But does she have firsthand information? Does she verify?